Hi, we're here with Dr. Brett. I'm Max Toulette, and today we're doing a few videos, and I have a quick question for Dr. Brett. He
Awesome, I
doesn't
love
know,
it. I
so this
love
is
it. This
off
is the
the
kind of
cuff.
stuff I actually love. Right, go.
My question for
Yeah,
you
please.
is, how do you deal with the false indoctrination of the world
Yeah.
and the reality of the world in sports, business, and family?
Yeah, like he's asking a really cool, deep question, and I love it. Look, the false indoctrination of the world, right? The way people, like, there's so many ways like we could look at that question, right? But the way people present themselves and the way they really are in real life, right? The way
Yes.
a business manager would be or a coach would be, right? They might get on the camera or whatever, and they look like an amazing person, and then the camera's off and they're screaming at their players or something. Like, we talk about this a lot, getting mentally tougher in business life, sports, and so on, mentally and emotionally more resilient and tougher. Right? So we're constantly working as people, as professionals, on letting go and controlling the things that we can control and letting go of the things we can't control. And a lot of times in life, there's a lot we can't control. So if we have a particularly vicious coach, we have some choices, right? There are things that we can control there. We might have to let go of that particular team, even though it means like letting go of teammates that we love. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That is a tough decision. A lot of people are faced with that, especially D1 sports players, right? The coach might be a total a-hole, and then what do? And it's not a personality fit for the player. So there's this constant sort of battle between self and other in life. I don't know if battle is the right word, but this jockeying between self and other.
Mm-hmm.
When do you honor yourself, right, to do what feels right for you? And when do you, like,
Put it
you know,
aside for the team.
yeah, and put it aside for the team. And that's an individual judgment call. No one can really make that decision for you. But I know one thing, that if you're if you're feeling particularly beat up and that you're feeling particularly almost abused in a certain situation, it's time to let it go. If you've done everything, you've communicated, you've addressed it, it's going nowhere, it's not a fit between you and the coach, not a fit between you and the agent, you and the manager, you and the team, whatever it is, if it's not a fit, at some point, it's time to let it go. You know this, right?
Yeah.
You know from experience, letting go is sort of the hardest thing we can do as humans,
Yeah.
right?
And
What are your thoughts on
I
that?
was gonna say that right there is great advice for anybody, any stage in life. Whatever you're doing, you have to trust yourself, like he says, and just be mindful. Sometimes you do have to take the step for yourself, and sometimes you do have to set it aside for the betterment of the team and the betterment of your family. But you have to be the judge of that. So I agree with you 100%. Now, let's
Okay.
divert a little bit.
Awesome. Love
That
it.
same question, how do you go? Because for myself, when I first became a pro athlete, I was more focused on fame,
Mhm.
getting cars, racking up money. So how do
I mean, I think that's pretty normal when you're young.
yeah? So how do you divert from what we as young
Right.
athletes coming up, young professionals
Yeah.
coming up? How do you divert from what we're being fed to seek
Right.
and to what you actually supposed to seek? Like now, I'm actually looking forward to trying to get properties, trying to raise
Right.
value of
Right.
my package, things
Right.
like that. So how would you say, how would you teach somebody or give advice to someone to let go of that education they've had to seek the cars, the girls,
Yeah,
the parties?
my sense is that people start to arrive there at some point in their careers. Meaning, like, if someone's not ready for a deeper talk around, look, the fame and the fortune's not what this thing is really about. It might be amazing to have unlimited possibility financially, but if you're not careful with, who you are as a person and how you're spending your time and money, you're going to wind up pretty empty, right? People wind up with cocaine addictions and all kinds of drug and alcohol addictions and, sex addictions and so on because they get too external in the world, right? The fame and fortune goes to their head. You've seen this in 1,000 cases, right?
Yeah.
Where the athlete gets full of themselves and they turn out to be, sort of jerks and assholes and so on. At some point, when someone's ready, sometimes it takes like pain and suffering. It takes being,
Just
failing.
right.
It takes some kind of something happening, some kind of catastrophe or whatever. But when someone's ready to take a deeper look at themselves, that's a great opportunity to really do an honest assessment of who is in my life that really cares about me and my soul and what I'm about, and who in my life is really more or less just using me. I'm a positive guy. I don't believe that all people are using all people. Like, I just don't. When you have a deep spirituality, you feel like there are other people out there that actually do care about your soul and actually have the capacity to communicate and say, look, I want to move in a different direction right now. I love you, pal, but I'm going to move in a different direction. That's a different communication than just disappearing or maximizing your self-interest or screwing somebody over and so on. So in my life's journey, I think this is a really, interesting question, and it's an interesting philosophy. How do we find that balance between self and other? How do we truly honor ourselves in this world? And then how do we unhook from the shallowness of seeking approval and acceptance outside of ourselves? At some point, if we don't do that journey, we will suffer. We will. Yes, go ahead.
So
yeah.
you said one thing right there. You said seek acceptance within yourself rather than out.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I like that. I like the way he interviews me. It's pretty cool. Can I? How do you train yourself basically to not go outside of yourself? Well, if you're on Facebook and you're noticing that you're posting a picture and you're basically attached or semi-addicted to the likes, you've got a problem, right? The problem is you're going outside of yourself for acceptance and approval. And so basically what you're doing is you're paying attention to your thoughts, your words, and your deeds, your actions. Some actions are approval seeking. Other actions are more self-contained, right? When you don't just go along to get along, right? When you actually stand up for who you are and what you're about, you find out pretty quickly who your friends are, right? And who respects and honors you. That's a behavior that teaches you about you and about others. So you're really paying attention constantly to your thoughts, to your words, and your deeds, and you're learning all the time, right? Constantly learning from the feedback from the world and the feedback from self. Do you feel good? Do you feel good when you follow somebody else and it doesn't, it's not your path? If it doesn't feel good, what are you doing? You're seeking acceptance, approval, love, whatever it is, outside of the self. If you're following your own path, which often is super difficult, right, it might be more difficult or harder initially, but over time you wind up feeling like pretty amazing about you, right? And then you have a beautiful wife and beautiful kids because it just happens naturally, right?
It said a lot there. I was going to try and rephrase it, but
no need to rephrase it.
Very cool. It was beautiful,
cool.
very beautiful.
Thank you, appreciate that.
You led me into the second question I had. The last question I have for you is, as far as taking care of yourself, we've talked about meditating.
Right.
One thing I do want you to talk about a little bit more is the way you eat, because we're bombarded with advertisement from McDonald's, KFC, these different places. As athletes, as people working, as professionals, how do we, from your point of view and your education standard, how do you go about eating properly and not giving in to all the advertisement that we see and all that?
Yeah, this is a massive challenge. This question is a massive challenge in our culture. It's a little easier for a self-disciplined athlete, because you're basically, your paycheck's on the line. You gotta, you're a forward. You gotta have speed, right? And you need to eat well, and that you're vegan, so you're paying attention to your diet all the time. Many people are struggling with their diets. Food is what I say is one of the hardest things on this planet to manage. That's a huge challenge for almost everyone.
One of the hardest drugs, I would say.
Yeah, it is. But a lot of people that wind up in depressions, one of the first things I do with them, because there's a propensity in our culture to take a pill instead of develop a skill or change your habits or change your relationship with yourself or others. A lot of times when you're depressed, you need to exercise more, change your diet, eat greener, eat lighter, take some of the pressure off that way. You know, I know you do like no dairy.
Mm-hmm.
You probably, you know, don't do like things, probably very little bread and wheat, you know what I mean? So you're really doing a very high end, you know, in terms of self-care around your diet. For a lot of people, it doesn't have to be that extreme, but just taking some of the pressure off by drinking less caffeine, less alcohol, less dairy. These things make a massive difference. More exercise, meditation always helps, but a lot of times people get depressed in part because their interpersonal relationships aren't the best. So really developing yourself as a person and then letting go of situations that are causing significant pain. Like if you're in a really bad relationship, you know, taking a pill is not really the answer, right? You have to move on from that relationship, no matter how challenging it is. And that can be a business relationship as well, right? Mm-hmm. It could be with an agent, it could be with a manager, with a coach, right? It could be with other teammates. So really, what you ideally want to do, it's not just changing your diet, although that helps a lot because when you eat well, you feel better. But it's also about changing your life and your lifestyle and how you relate to yourself and others.
Beautiful. So, just look within yourself, basically, because as he was saying, you have to make sure your surroundings as well as what you're intaking to your body both are conducive to what you're trying to obtain in life. So just focus on that. Spend some time with yourself. And myself, I'm gonna rewatch this video because he said a lot of things I couldn't pick up. So I would recommend the same for you too.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm Dr. Brett with Max Toulette.